Thank you. Also, Tom, I got to say right off the top, thank you very much. Actually, just last night, I came home from work pretty late, and my wife showed me there was a, we're calling it the Class 101Z, but thank you very much for the little onesie, the Class 101 baby outfit. We're really excited about that. I'll get you some pictures as soon as we get her in it. I felt bad trying to wake her up to put it in it to get a picture just for this. So soon enough, I'll have that. But thank you very much. That was really thoughtful. Let's see, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is going to be interesting for me because I'm going to get, mostly silence in response to when I make a point or say something, and that's going to be confusing for me. I'm just going to move on unless somebody interjects a question or gives me a little here, so I know that it came across. So we'll see. Anyway, right off the top, the things we're going to try to cover today. I'm gonna dive right into the actual instructional material rather than giving you sort of big picture stuff. We're going to talk about very quickly 2019 by the numbers. I got some cool stats I want to share with you. I'm going to do a contest announcement. I'll tell you about that in a little while. It's sort of out of order. That should be at the end. And the updated workbooks. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about what we changed, what we didn't. And I'm going to show you a resource I put together. It's going to help you very quickly get up to speed on exactly what's different, what's the same. I think you're going to like that a lot. And then we'll do some questions, I guess, after the contest announcement there. And I will touch on what, if any, changes you need to make in terms of your approach to how you're thinking about your templates. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in unless there's anything right off the top. Tom or anybody else, anything I need to touch on to start?
You're here.
You're here. All right. That's going to haunt me. All right. So the stats right off the top, total students. And I actually just put this together a few minutes ago. My brother just sent over this data. You're looking at about 446 SAT students and 1,400, a little more than that for the ACT students. So you guys are doing a lot of business, a lot of work with your students there. Tests completed, you're looking at 889 SAT tests and 3,412 ACT tests. That's a lot, so congrats on that. The numbers are going to keep getting bigger. So test problems completed, you're looking at 91,900 SAT problems and 454,520 ACT problems. So congrats. I'm excited to see when these numbers start breaking 1 million. That's going to be very satisfying. Lesson problems completed. So now we're talking about just the problems out of the physical workbooks. For those, you're now looking at 77,000 for SAT, 231,000 for ACT. The percentages really aren't super relevant, except they're going to follow roughly the distribution of students you've had. I guess that makes sense. Quiz problems completed. Again, those are just the problems from the online database that you assigned as supplementary material for quizzes. 8,497 and 26,334 quiz problems completed. So you're keeping your students very busy. I like that. Worksheet problems completed. 4,265 for the SAT and 27,574. Keep in mind, these are the brand new worksheets that we rolled out towards the end of last year. So it's good to see that those are getting quite a bit of use. That's exciting. Total problems completed, 182,000 SAT problems, 740,000 ACT problems. Again, I love these numbers. This is one that I think is actually really cool. Total videos watched, and that's some portion of the video was watched. That's 60,010 videos have been watched by your students. So they're taking advantage of that resource. That's fantastic. That's 125,000 minutes of video, which is, again, really exciting. I just wanted to fly through that because I got to get to the actual meat of the presentation. and save times for questions. So really quickly, any questions about those statistics? Nothing at all. All right. I'm going to jump into the actual, the reason we're here, the idea of the training. So I'm going to talk really quickly about what has not changed. I'm going to talk about what has changed, what is actually physically new in the workbooks, and then what you should know. And a lot of this is going to be a recap of an email I sent out announcing all this, and then I will flesh all that out over the remainder of our time together today. And then a little bit about what you should know. And just to emphasize that right off the top, what you should know, that's going to be how some of the new strategies, they're really powerful strategies. Some of them are better suited for certain types of students as opposed to other types of students. So for students chasing a perfect score on the math section of the ACT, for example, they're going to need to have a different approach to their pacing than a student who would be very happy with a 27. And that's one of the things we get into in our books, and I'll talk about that one in detail because I think that's one of the biggest changes. It's something we're really emphasizing now. Other thing you should know, just right off the top, because I didn't put this in any of the other slides, you'll notice you now have two different covers, which is exciting, and they're different colors, the ACT and the SAT. You'll be able to tell your books apart, which is a nice little advantage. Also, the teacher editions or the instructor editions, you can see the stripe across the bottom of each of those. The student editions do not have those stripes. So again, you'll now be able to tell instructor editions, you'll be able to distinguish them from student editions pretty easily. That was probably overdue. So I'm excited that we made that change. Tom, do you want to talk at all about the artwork on the covers? Because we did change the covers of the ACT books as well. I couldn't hear that very well if that was directed at me. I can keep going if I hear a big yes. Yeah. All right, outstanding. So moving right along, what has not changed, and this is significant, the page numbers are, I'm going to say, virtually identical. I fudged it on one or two of them where I send you to a page where the content from that page is actually on the previous page, like on a double page spread, because I needed to borrow a page here and there to emphasize a new strategy or add some new content or practice problems. But anytime a student turns to that page that the contents or table of contents directed them to, in the old book or the new book, they're going to immediately arrive at the content they're looking for. So there's a handful of those where I moved it one way or the other. With the exception of that, everything is fully compatible. The existing books you already had, they're fully compatible with the online system. And by that, I mean all of the SAT and ACT style questions in the physical workbooks still correspond with the online system. So they're still assignable the same way. So all the lessons in the workbook can be assigned the same way you always have been. They'll still work the same way with templates, and any changes we made are isolated to the instruction and the strategy and really what occurs between the physical lessons. And that stuff doesn't reference anything in the online system. As a result of that, you're not going to have issues with students on an old book or on a new book having trouble using the system, and it all corresponds one-to-one. That was one of the really important things we wanted to make sure we did. And then obviously the video solutions. The asterisks here I put, the changes we did make, we eliminated a couple typos. And in a couple of cases, I had gotten an email from a tutor, and in some cases from instructors, Class 101 owners sitting in the room. And in some of those cases, someone would point out, technically, this answer could also be correct. Or technically, like, I get that this one is far and away the best answer choice, but technically there's an issue with that. someone would point out a really good point that was probably outside the scope of what's tested on the SAT or the ACT, but certainly worth making that change. When we did make those changes, we didn't change the position of the correct answer. So if the answer had previously been B, the answer is still B. And so whichever version of the problem the student looked at, they wouldn't have an issue with that. They're still going to get the right answer. If they got the right answer, they're still going to get the wrong answer if they got the wrong answer. So again, we did everything we could to make this as seamless as possible. But there were a lot of just really powerful strategies, great tips that we've accumulated again over the year and a half or so that we wanted to get into the book. So it was time. I'm going to go ahead and move on there. Any questions about what has not changed?
Everybody know.
No. I need like a designated person to look for hands and then tell me if there are none. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So what has changed? We eliminated all known typos. So good. I feel much better about that. We added more skill builder exercises or exercise questions for SAT. So I was working on this a minute ago and I just made an error right there. So the irony of that being immediately below, we eliminated typos. That's not lost on me, that irony. There should be a bullet point here. Should be a new line. So we added more skill builder exercise questions, primarily in the grammar section, which is obviously the ACT English section and the SAT writing section. In those cases, there are just, we had usually like 4 or 5 examples. And so we went to a mostly standardized 8 examples for each of those. When I say examples, the skill builder exercises. Those are obviously, they've been added. Again, if a student were working with the old book, they would have 4 or 5 and they would be, none the wiser that those exist because they don't correspond with the online system. So it's not as though they would, go to punch in their answers and find, wait a second, there's more questions here. I don't have these. That's the only issue. So if you have a classroom full of students, you probably want to make sure they're all using the exact same edition. So we also improved the macro strategies. I've been calling those approaches. Again, I mentioned this earlier, specifically the ACT Math, for example. The way that you want to approach that section, especially with regard to pacing, is going to be really different if you're chasing a perfect score versus, you're hoping to get from a 22 to a 25 or 26. It's a different test for those 2 students, and we wanted our strategies to reflect that. So those macro strategies, we've significantly improved there. We've also added detailed instructions for the micro strategies, and the distinction there is that that's for specific problem types. Example would be something like main idea questions. We added a piece to help you identify the actual main idea. Various others for paired passages, for example. We came up with some really good tips and strategies for how to approach paired passages that I had wanted to add that for a long time. Now it's in there, I feel good about it. So any questions about what has changed? Designated person, let me know if there are no hands. Yeah, please.
Can you hear this mic? Can you hear this? Max, can you hear me?
I'm not going to be able to hear. Somebody's going to need to repeat this near a microphone, probably. Okay. I'm having trouble hearing. If somebody wants to use the chat window, if there's anyone near the computer, if someone wants to like chat that to me, that would be great.
Can you hear this?
Yeah, very well. I can hear that very clearly.
Can you hear this mic?
Yeah. Whoever said, can you hear this mic? I hear that one very well.
All right, Matt, this is it. We're going to pass this off. So we have
or Florida about to ask you a question.
Got it.
Quick question. Now that your books are in service, if you find a typo or you receive something typo from someone, will you notify, or how would you notify the instructors who are using the book so we can make those changes or
Mhm.
at least identify them?
Yeah, so I'll tell you first the way we have been doing it, and then how I'm literally later today setting this up. I'll show you the resource right now. So the way we have been doing that is we keep a Google Doc. It's a spreadsheet. It's available. You can get to it through the, when you log in as an instructor, top of the page, there's a download materials button, and you'll see the version of the workbooks. You click on that, and there's a button that says errata, as in these are the known errors. You click that, and it takes you to that spreadsheet, and you can actually see everything that's been reported. And there's instructions on that page for how to report anything that you've recognized or anything you identified as an issue if it's not there. That's how we've been doing it. I'm setting up a better version of that later today. You'll get to it exactly the same way. So if you want to just email me directly with anything you find, that's ultimately what the instruction says when you get to the errata. If you don't mind checking it first to see if it's been reported, that's great. But again, if you send it to me, that's the first thing I'm going to do is check to make sure it hasn't been reported. If it hasn't, I'll add it to that. And you know, we did make a lot of changes. We did proofread very carefully. If we do spot, you know, little stuff here and there, we will first post it on the errata, and then ultimately we'll be doing a very slight updated version to eliminate anything we hear about that is, you know, probably no one would notice, or one or two people will notice. If they notice it, we'll just update that version just so we don't have to keep sending that out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Will you real quickly rehash how you find that again? We had a question. Tell us where that is again. Pull that up.
Let's see. I can pull it up on a different screen and then drag it in probably, but it's at the top of, let me open another window here.
Help resources or download materials?
Download materials. Yeah, if someone's got it open in front of them. So it's at the top of the screen. It says download materials, and it has the PDF versions of the books, including the new ones. So you guys can get to those right there. And there should be one of the menu items there says errata.
Click on that. No, click on the PDF.
It is. It's pulled up right here. It's
Oh,
there.
try that. No, we're not seeing it.
Oh, you know, okay, so I think it's up for the SAT. We may have pulled it down for the ACT because I'm replacing it today. So
Okay, that explains everything.
There you go. Sorry. As of today, that will be resolved. My brother's doing a minor update. Couple of things. I mean, not a lot of stuff to be looking out for, but depending on where you are in the country, this is probably a bigger issue for some people as opposed to others. Contracts with schools. Increasingly, we're hearing from people where schools are saying these progress reports, or the fact that we're asking students to list their gender, is not okay. Like, that just as part of their school policy, that's not a thing. So we are switching it up so you no longer have to enter that. We don't track anything. It's not an important metric for us. It was just so we knew which pronouns to use in the emails. We're just switching over to the more colloquial, you know, they, them pronouns. Like, if your student has overdue work, they need to log in as soon as possible. And that's increasingly becoming acceptable even in academic writing. So we're cool with that. It just required a change. But when he does that, we'll be adding the link to the errata button, or the errata information there.
All right. Thanks, Matt. We have Mark from Florida.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Matt, thank you very much for your help over the last several weeks. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I got verification from my students that they got the drop shipment, so we're all good. So thank you so much for that.
Happy to help.
Thank you. Question. They have the newest version of the prep class books.
Mm-hmm.
I have the older version of the instructor manual. Will that create an issue for me, or am I okay?
So the short answer is, for the skill builder exercises, you know, where we went from, like, there's 5 of those little skill builder problems, we went to like 8. So you'd probably want to get the new edition there. because they may ask you about question number 7, you might look down and you don't have it in your book. That would be the primary issue. The only other issue is the handful of questions where we had to modify a tiny thing about the question. You know, where technically you could have 2 correct answers, or technically the right answer has a sort of a higher level error. So I would strongly recommend updating it. That's the primary reason why we're doing free updates for anyone who purchased, or for any books you purchased, the teacher editions after 10/1/2019, so October 1st, or on October 1st or later. We're doing free replacements for those. And for anything you purchased before that, it's just $20. So half off on all replacements for the month of January. We've just added that to the shopping cart. So you can, when you go to the shopping cart, you'll just see replacement workbook. You just click that, it's $20. That's my recommendation. The other thing I wanted to stress is for any unused student copies, again, anything you purchased after October 1st, you go ahead and you can add those to your cart as well for, or sorry, this is where it's actually slightly complicated. You can purchase those for $20 a piece if they're prior to 10/1, or if it's a student who already has the book and is, you know, has done the course, but for some reason you want to replace that, you can. For any unused inventory you've got, just shoot me an email saying, hey, I've got this many on hand. We can double check that against when you bought it and how many licenses you've used to determine how many of those are free, and we'll let you know. Cool, we can add, or we can ship you X number of free books to satisfy that. If that sounded complicated, I can try to walk through that one more time. It's pretty simple, but I may have garbled my way through it. Did that answer your question?
I think there may be a question, but I've got a follow-up for mine.
Go ahead.
And I'm proving that I'm a newbie. Can I get a PDF of the section for the teacher guide immediately while I'm waiting for the actual to come in? Okay, then perfect.
Download materials right at the top of the page. That same menu I was just talking about. It's right there. And the resource I'm going to show you guys in just a minute. Let me actually click back to that. I'll actually, was there another question as well?
Yes.
Hi, Matt. It's Sean. I have a question for you. If I had a student that took my December class and now they're going to repeat the class in the spring, is there any harm in just using the same book that they currently have?
If they're going to be among students who have the new book,
yeah.
you might want to give them the new one, because the strategies, like I said, I'll show you in a minute. The strategies have significantly improved in some cases. And
Okay.
if you have a student who goes, wait, my book doesn't say to do that. Like, that sounds really helpful. Why am I getting, bum intel?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That would be my recommendation. And like I said, it's $20, and you certainly could charge a materials fee for someone to retake the class if you wanted.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea if I implemented that in December.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
All right, you bet.
Any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions? All right, carry on, Matt. Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. All right, so that's sort of the higher level what has changed. I'm going to get to examples in 1 second. So what's all new? The appendix is all new. That was, again, a way that we handled getting more info in there without messing with page numbers and screwing the whole thing up for you. So the appendix includes cheat sheets for each section of the test, or of each test. The calendar, we've added a little one-page calendar that has all the test dates circled, just so students can mentally keep that in mind and plan accordingly. It has all the test dates on it. We added a weekly planner. It's 24 weeks. So it's 6 pages of just weekly planner stuff, and I'll show you that in 1 second. It's certainly not something you should feel like you have to use. It's in there so that students can keep track of which days they're supposed to come in, or what they want to make sure they do, or if they're going to miss a class, they can follow up on that stuff. It's additional pages that should help them on that if they want to. But again, if a student says, oh, I use my phone for that, or I have, scheduling, I use my binder, fine. But it's there if they need it. One of Tom's big requests was notes pages at the end. We've added those. And we moved the tips for test day to the very back of both books so that it's easy to find. It's the last thing and they'll always know right where it is. I didn't want it to be buried somewhere in the middle and then kid shows up without a ID or something. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump to this. I'm gonna go ahead and open, this is the resource, and I'll send a follow-up email with this link. And you guys should be able to see this right now. Let me move this. And this is gonna be small, I realize. But I wanna make sure, maybe I can make the text bigger. Zoom, probably have a zoom. Zoom in. There we go. Enhance. 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 That's a joke from Super Troopers if you haven't seen it. And there's no reason to see it. But that's the origin of that one. So here's how this works. This is a brand new piece of software that I love called Notion. Without getting into how to use it, it's very powerful if you learn how to use it to create things. How to use it as a user to consume someone else's content through it, super easy. All you need to do is think of this as a 3-dimensional spreadsheet. And by that I mean, you've got page number over here, you've got the title of the section here, whether it was updated or not. So updated or changed, and then down lower I have some things that are new. But everything has a status, whether it was updated, changed, or unchanged, or sorry, updated, unchanged, or new. And then I have a brief description of what was changed. And again, a lot of these are just added more skill builder questions to page 43. The 3-dimensional part I mentioned, the part that's really awesome about this, is colons, dashes, and semicolons. That's been updated. We added more skill builder questions. When you hover your mouse over colons, dashes, and semicolons, you can go ahead and click open. And right here is an attachment. You click that and it opens the actual pages from the workbook, specifically the teacher edition, where you can go ahead and see everything you would need to know. So this is I guess an additional direct answer for Mark's question of where you can get to all that info. So these basic skill practice questions, those are new. You'd want to be able to access that. If you want to brush up, as I said, on just the parts that have changed, you can do that. You can take a look, if you wanted to put together, in fact, I can do it. You can put together your own PDF of the things you want to review. For example, this is for math, choose the best approach for you. This is the ACT version. I'll send you guys links to both of these, the ACT and the SAT version, later today. Although I almost don't want to do that, because go to the beach, do something fun. I'll send it to you, but promise me you're not going to waste beach time on this right now. Go ahead and click on this one. And this is one I want to go into in depth and talk a little bit about what is actually different. I think everyone's listening attentively, but can I get someone say, yes, we can still hear you?
We're good. We're good. We can hear.
Okay, cool. Got it. Yeah, I think someone turned the mic off, and so I wasn't getting any crowd noise. I was like, uh-oh. All right.
We're good.
So specifically with regard, this is the page, choose the best approach for you, which relates to ACT math. This is a super powerful new strategy. And I can actually, I think I can zoom in on this. Yeah. So we've looked at a lot of data on how students are performing on sections of the test. One of the things we've noticed is that there are significant trends in performance. Obviously, everything you'd expect to be true about a section where the difficulty increases over the course of that math section. All those trends are fairly obvious. Lower scoring students hit a wall earlier, middle scoring students hit a wall a little later, but everybody hits a wall. Even top performing students who are routinely almost getting a 36 they hit a wall right around question 58. Even the top performing students, and some of that's a function of timing, they're running out of time, and some of that's a function of there are really difficult questions near the end of the section. But for a student who's scoring below 23, they're going to miss more than 50% of questions, or they're going to correctly answer fewer than 50% of questions after question 30, and less than 30% after question 40. So what we've put together here is, this is just a small sampling. I had to sort of edit this all together, recreate that from scratch. But the thing to notice here, again, I went 36, 33, 30, 27, 24, because I didn't want to take up a whole page with that chart. But what you're seeing is the fact that a student who's going to get a 21, he needs to get about half of the questions right. A student who's shooting for 36 needs to get virtually all the questions right, a 59 or a 60, depending on how other students are doing on that test. 33, you only need 54 right. 30, you only need 50 right. 27, 42 to 44. So what we're noticing about that is, because all test questions are worth the same amount of points, does it really make sense for every student to allocate their time evenly across the entire section, especially lower performing students? Since we're starting with a 22 or a 23, a lot of the students that you're working with that are starting in that range, does it make sense for them to speed through the easy and medium questions, probably making more mistakes because they're rushing, to get to the more difficult questions that they're probably going to miss anyway because they're more difficult? Some of this is pretty common sense, but we broke it down to two different approaches, and we really do break it down to figuring out where you hit a wall. And we use the metric of count back from the final problem after you take your first diagnostic test. Count back from the final problem of the test to the point where your percentage correct gets above 50%. And keep that in mind, that most students from 50 on are missing most of those problems. So when you see that, they may find that they hit a wall around 40 or 35. Doesn't mean that they should immediately switch to like, okay, I'm only going to attempt 35 questions. But it does mean that they're going to want to spend the bulk of their time on the questions they know they can get right, and at least take some of the time from the end. If you're, again, allocating a minute per question, you want to reallocate that for those hardest questions that you have a good shot at getting right. And when you read a question and go, oh, I have no idea, don't try to learn the math on the spot. Bubble in an answer and move on. That one's not for you. That's the strategy in a nutshell. There's a little bit of math here in terms of calculating where exactly you are hitting the wall. There's a little bit of math in terms of, in item 2 there, calculate your optimal pacing strategy. The idea here is just demonstrating for students, if you're hitting a wall around 45, if you reallocate your time, you go from having 1 minute per question to like 1.6 minutes per question. If you allocate all the time from those last 15 questions to questions 21 through 45, you're now giving yourself a much better chance of answering all of those questions correctly. This isn't a finite thing. You have to do it this way. In fact, that's the whole idea behind having two approaches. The second approach here, I'll give you the titles again. Take your time on easy and medium questions, and bank your time for difficult questions. This is for students who are scoring above a 30 and have a realistic possibility of getting to a 36, or a realistic possibility of getting to the mid-low 30s. Strategy I was just describing, it only works on or for students who don't have a chance in heck of getting those final problems right. Again, some of the math we were actually looking at show that even for students who are scoring like a 27 to 29, I have it in here as a stat somewhere, they're barely above random, like they get down to 25% correct for the final 5 or 10 problems. That math is in there. I just don't want to waste your time while I look for it. The idea there is if you're getting down to basically random, does it make sense to spend an entire 10 minutes to try to get 5% better odds on those last 10 questions? Or could you take those 10 minutes and allocate it to problems that you were rushing through that you probably could have answered if you had 10 extra minutes? The math just points to, it makes a lot more sense to do it that way. But again, if you're shooting for a top score, there is no strategy where you get to just skip all the easy and medium questions and allocate more time to the harder ones. But you do need to think in terms of banking your time from the easy and medium questions in order to have more time on the medium, hard questions. The idea being that you still have to answer all of them, but you don't have to take a minute on questions that only take you 25, 30 seconds. That's time you're banking to use later. So anyway, that's worth keeping in mind. Similar strategy, review your initial diagnostic test. We talked extensively about this in a slightly earlier section about how to raise your score. It's all about efficiently answering questions, not focusing purely on speed, but focusing on efficiency. And that means taking a second to size up the question and taking a second to scan the answer choices. And I'm going to show you that page next because that's a really powerful one. The idea is you want to, if you look at patterns in the answer choices, they can tell you likely what's going on in that question. And I'll show you that in just a second. The last piece is just executing that optimal strategy. And a lot of this is focusing on, I think Tom and I have talked about this. There's a analogy we use sometimes about a race car and figuring out what your top gear is, like your top safe pace is. So, because obviously rushing through, missing more questions doesn't help anybody. You can't get a perfect score by rushing if you miss 10 in the first 40 questions. So that is an example of an updated strategy that for each of your students, you can pose it to them as simply as possible. Just if you're starting at a 30 or above, you should strongly think about banking time for those harder questions. If you're starting below a 30, or your goal is to get somewhere under 30, what you'd be very happy with, again, that's like the 88th percentile. If you get to 29 or 27, I have the math somewhere on there. The idea is there is that you're better off allocating your time where you're going to get those points. Does that all make sense? I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I also realize that's kind of complicated. I can't hear.
We're good. We're good.
Good? Cool. Awesome. So I've put that together, something like that for every one of these. The thing I was just mentioning was scanning the answer choices. Again, I'm just focused on ACT math, but really deliberately focusing on how to identify what you're being asked to find, like underline it in the problem, scan the question and answer choices for patterns and possible shortcuts, and then solve the question in an organized way. Those are the three basic principles. And then each of these is a way to scan the answer choices, especially knowing about process of elimination and when you can plug something in and eliminate, all the answers that are smaller, all the answers that are larger, all of that stuff. But there's a lot of things to look for, like when you're dealing with multiples of factors, you can figure out pretty quickly that the, what am I thinking of? Your answer needs to include the, I'm blanking on the word, the multiple. If all the answers are multiples of 11, you need to be including a factor of 11. That's probably a key to the problem. Each of these is worth reading. They're all pretty simple. I have a lot of talk about how to use your calculator and how not to use your calculator. How to check your answers. Don't just retrace your footsteps. If you just look at your math on the page, you're very likely to not see your mistake. If you have extra time, and you probably shouldn't, but if you do have extra time and you're checking your answers, solve the problem again, ideally with a different strategy or a different approach, so that you can, like if you did substitution the first time to solve a simultaneous equation, the second time through, maybe solve it using, what's the other one, elimination. So I'm gonna move on. Does anyone have any questions? I wanted to, rather than going over all of these lightning fast, I'm gonna go ahead and put together a more detailed ongoing series of these. But but this is your resource where you can check any one of these to see exactly what's new and different. Does that make sense?
Matt, we do have a question.
Yeah, please.
Sean again.
Hey, Sean.
I'm sorry, Matt. I always have questions.
No problem. It helps.
Do you have any, as you were analyzing the data, did you have any data on the score improvement for our students? And I know that's only as good as.
It's really complicated though. So the challenge is that most of your students are taking tests in chunks, like one section at a time. And so it's really hard for us to parse through what that improvement looks like. That's the biggest problem. I can talk about that. I think we have some numbers, but I don't have a super high degree of confidence in those numbers is the issue.
Well, and I know it's only as good as owners going back in and entering students'
that's the other big
scores.
problem.
Right.
That's a pretty good segue to the contest, actually, if I could do that really quickly. I'll answer any other questions about this, and I hope that people will contact me with any questions they have about this. I want to be respectful of your time and
Okay.
wrap up.
Do we have another question? Anyone in the room? All right. Back to you, Matt.
All right, I'm going to open my presentation one more time. The contests. I've been talking with Tom a lot about this. We're going to give away a bunch of free workbooks and licenses. And we wanted to have some different categories here so that it's not a foregone conclusion who's going to win. So each of these bullet points is a different opportunity to get some free workbooks. So the owner with the greatest growth in student activations, that's by number of students, year over year from last year, January 1st through June 1st, compared with this year, 3 free workbooks there, or 3 free licenses and workbooks. Each of these is 3 free as I go through here. Owner with the greatest growth in student activations by percentage. So again, if you went from, I think we're going with a minimum of 10 you worked with last year. If you have the greatest percentage growth, you got a good shot. So owners with the greatest number of student activations overall. This should be a new bullet point. I was literally wrapping this up like as I was getting ready to log in. So again, the most overall, and obviously there's some front runners for those. Owner with the greatest single student ACT score increase. That's going to be an actual ACT score, like a real test day administered by ACT, minus their initial diagnostic score for this year between now and the event in June. That's again 3 free. The owner with the greatest SAT improvement, same terms there. Owner with the greatest percentage of actual SAT and ACT test scores recorded in our software. This is why I say that was a good segue from Sean's question. Anybody can win this. They're yours for the taking. You just got to collect that data and put it in. You get 100%. I don't care how many ways it ties. Everybody's going to get. I actually have some terms for the ties. This one I think everyone will be excited about. 25 free licenses and workbooks for anyone who has a student who earns a perfect score on either the SAT or the ACT. Let us know. We'll be overjoyed, and you get 25 free licenses and workbooks for any, if you have a student who gets a perfect score. Same date range there. We're going to announce all the winners at the event in June. Prizes 3 free for each of those. In the event of a 2-way tie, we're going to round up, and those 2 owners get to split 4, so 2 each. 3-way tie or more, everybody gets 1. And then obviously the item for number 7, the one about the perfect score, that's 25. No limit on that. So you guys, you can pay for all your test prep if you just get a couple perfect scores. So that's the secret. And I just want to point out that the minimum we're giving away is 18, valued at your pricing at $2,500. If pricing that any of our other partners have a standard volume discount, they'd be that's $7,500 in terms of the value there. The maximum we're giving away, technically, there's if every one of your students gets a perfect score, I could calculate the maximum, I guess, but I didn't. So there you go. Any questions about those contests?
Anybody have any? No, we're good.
Cool. I hope that's exciting. That there's opportunities
Great.
to win some free product there. I guess the last thing is just to let you know, or to answer any questions, and to let you know that as far as the templates go, you don't need to learn anything new about that. Your templates are going to work just as well as they have been. You can continue to add additional quizzes, additional worksheets, obviously as many free practice or as many practice tests as you can. We recommend that. But there's nothing new to learn there. I already did that. And that is everything, I believe.
Excellent,
any
Matt,
final
thank
questions?
you. Any questions, guys? We have a question from Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Matt, this is Andrew from Cleveland. We've talked about this a few times. Has there been any updates or progress made on the automated scoring of the answer sheets?
Yes and no. That's going to be part of the new system. So it's not something that we're going to be integrating into this one. As much as I can say on that is that we lost 2 developers. We have our engineer. We hired 2 more developers and a project manager. We're spending an exorbitant amount of money on it to speed the thing up at this point. That's a feature I'm really excited to add, but it isn't something that's coming imminently.
So if you had to guess, are we talking sometime in 2020, 2021, or I'd prefer not to answer that question?
Definitely the third one, given my track record. I don't want to give you bad intel. I still cringe over that, but I think it's highly likely. Sorry, the new system will be available in 2020. That part there is no doubt. We're organizing our sprints from here to the finish line right now. So as we continue to knock out those sprints, I'll know if we're like, okay, our sprints based on our based on our projections, you know, if we're going over the first 3 or 4 of those sprints, if we go over by 20% on the time, we still can have a prediction, roughly speaking, of when we should be hitting the finish line, barring unforeseen issues. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be many more months, but I don't want to talk too much about it because again, I don't want to do that to you guys.
No, you're good. You're good, Matt. We've got one more question here.
Okay.
Hey, it's Sean again, but I'm asking a
Hey,
question
Sean.
on behalf of Michelle.
Oh, okay.
She wants to know if the 4-week template is pared down or if it's the same content as the 8-week all at once.
It's the first half of the 8-week course.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the idea, is that you could enroll, and Tom, I think, can speak to that better than I can. I'd have to review it to make sure that's true. I believe that's the case, is that students could take the 4-week and then opt to continue, and they wouldn't be repeating a bunch of stuff.
And if a student is repeating, is there an additional 4-week like template setup that can be applied, or is it?
No, you'd just be looking at the second half of the 8-week. But
Okay.
there's quite a bit more content in the system that's not in your template.
Right,
So
right.
there's always the opportunity to supplement.
Right.
Thank you.
Of course.
Other questions, guys? Anybody else? Are we good? Anyone? All right, Matt, we thank you so much. You're so integral in our success at Class 101. We appreciate your time today. We'll give you a round of applause and you can sign off.
Thank you guys very much. I will also, I'll send an email with all the links I mentioned. And I want to thank everybody as well for your patience during the month of December. My wife and I think I've told a lot of you this, we had our second daughter and it's been amazing. But I've been, a little sleep deprived and working really hard finishing the books. And you guys have been amazing. Some of you being very patient on some things, and some of you just being super supportive in your emails. So thank you so much, and I look forward to talking with all of you going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, lunch is in the back. We've got 55 minutes. We'll meet back here at 1 o'clock to get our next thing going. So enjoy.